First of all, Mr. Ganley, can I... Declan, okay. Declan.
Mr. Ganley's my dad.
Well, first of all, Declan, can I thank you for what you achieved in Ireland and what your colleagues achieved? I think you've given an opportunity for the people of Europe and for many of us who've been looking to do something different for a long time. First though, can I ask you, in Ireland you had a vote and nobody else did. Where does that leave us now?
Well, it leaves us in this ridiculous situation where, well, actually, other people did have a vote on the same formula when it was called the European Constitution. The French voted no in huge numbers, as did the Dutch. So France and the Netherlands have both rejected the same formula. Their governments conspired against their own people to ensure that they didn't even get to vote another way. In spite of the democratic decision of the French and Dutch people, their governments have ratified the Lisbon Constitution, which is disgusting. The Irish were asked to vote because of some unique aspects of our constitution, the Irish Constitution. They were asked to vote on it. We were the only people that had that vote. As you know, it was the sort of battle of Thermopylae for all of Europe that was fought in Ireland. And the Irish people, in their infinite wisdom, went out and cast a very well-informed vote and voted no. Because one of the clear exhibits of why we should vote no is the fact that the French and the Dutch were being completely ignored, as well as the fact that this constitution is very clearly anti-democratic. The other reason, and this may come across as shocking to some people, is that we're pro-European. We recognised that for the European Union to be successful, that it needs to be democratic and accountable, because if it isn't, it's going to fail. And it's going to fail in perhaps a very ugly way.
You mentioned Thermopylae. Of course, the Persians did eventually overwhelm those Spartans. But sometime later there was another battle where all of the Greeks together beat the Persians.
Very well put.
Who are you? Are you the Spartans or are you the rest of the Greeks?
I think we're Europeans. We are the spirit. We're certainly inspired by it. That was lit at the Battle of Thermopylae and the eventual defeat of the Persians, and people like Socrates and Aristotle, and then the Roman Republic that came later, and everything that came after that.
For those of us who want change, then, do you think that the European Union, as it is today, will smash itself to pieces on successive Irish no's, or
I hope
think there needs to be more answers?
No, I hope not. I think that the Irish cannot be expected, to your analogy, we can't be expected to stand there forever and fight off the anti-democratic hordes. We've done it. I think we'll do it again. But there's no doubt in my mind that they'll just come back and keep asking the same question until eventually we cave and we give the right answer. We cannot fight this fight alone, which is one of the reasons that one of the many reasons that Libertas is doing what it's doing. We need to unite the voice of Europeans in a way that prevents the unelected elites in Brussels from dividing and conquering Europe. Look at this. They've managed to carve away the French, the Dutch and the Irish votes and treat them as if they were all totally separate things, pointing the fingers at those citizens and saying there's something wrong with you, when those citizens had pointed to the elites of Brussels and said, no, actually, there's something wrong with you. And Libertas seeks to give people a very effective vehicle where they can exercise their democratic voice and be heard in a way that Brussels will find it increasingly difficult to ignore. And if we do that, we will ensure that this game of divide and conquer that Brussels has been using against all of the peoples of Europe up to now, that it ends. And that we put power back to where it belongs, which is in the people's hands, and then they will get to decide what Brussels can or cannot do.
Our leaders, of course, have a long history of putting their hands in their pockets for campaigns overseas. When it comes to real European solidarity, voluntary solidarity, we're actually quite good at it. You've said something in the past, and I'm not trying to draw out of you an accusation here, But you have used this expression even today, that the British went too quietly into the night.
Yeah.
That we didn't get the referendum.
Yeah.
We didn't vote no. We didn't even manage to win the fight to get the referendum. Does that to you indicate a depth of the lack of democracy that are the British people and others defeatist? Were we simply outmanoeuvred? Or
I think you're outmanoeuvred. Look, I mean, you know, it was, you were outmanoeuvred, but temporarily. You can't continue to outmanoeuvre the Brits forever, as plenty of people have found throughout history. The British people were deliberately denied information on what was going to be ratified in their name. I think, and I put this as a very constructive criticism, but one of the things that the referendum campaign, I thought the Fight for a Referendum campaign did in the UK was it campaigned purely on the issue of that we must have a referendum. And it did that sort of trying to present itself as a united force that was not for or against the European Constitution. It just wanted people to have a say on it, and that's noble. But I think there was a mistake made, which was that what was in that Constitution should have been made really clear to people that because once they know what's being done in their name, for example, they should have said, look, this is why you need a vote. You're going to get a president of Europe that never needs to ask you for a vote. They're going to speak for you. Article 48 means that there will never be a referendum anywhere in Europe ever again, you can be sure of it, on any question, and that they can give themselves more power without ever having to ask you for permission of a ballot box. The fact, very few people in Britain know that approximately 80% of British law is now initiated in Brussels. They don't know that. When people find these things out, and you have to ask why don't they know? They don't know because the ruling elites don't want them to know. Once they know, they want to do something about it. Don't be afraid to have the courage to stand up and say, this is what is wrong, this is why you need to go and have your voice heard on this. Right. The argument of a sort of the abstract argument of, well, democracy is a good thing, while it's obviously right, it's abstract.
So, we agree on that. The next step strategically then is to put candidates up in the European elections.
Yeah.
In all countries, nearly all countries?
All of them, hopefully.
Absolutely all of them.
We're far more further down the road in some countries than we are in others. And obviously we've been focusing quite a lot on the larger member states because they're the ones that have got the most seats. But places like Ireland, my own Ireland, like Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and others, they're important as well. And so we're out there engaged with every member state at this point.
Can I ask you specifically about, well, for instance, Denmark and Sweden?
Yes.
Because from our point of view, we are part of a family of democratic, progressive, international, not Eurosceptics, if you like, who want precisely what you've been talking about. Maybe there's some variation in their attitude to the institutions of the EU. But what a lot of us are worried about is that the only real consequence of this, of you putting up candidates, for instance, in Sweden or Denmark, is that you will wipe out the representation of Unilisten or even Junilist in Denmark. Will you be putting up candidates against Jens Peter's old June movement in Denmark and in Sweden against the Junilists?
If that's the only option that we have, yes, we will. The fact is that we need voters all over Europe. This isn't, when you pander to sort of segmentation, you are actually doing Brussels' work for them. So by saying, oh, well, here it should be this, and don't go to this place for this reason because these other guys are up there. No. Libertas wants to give voters everywhere the ability to vote for a Libertas candidate. Now, if that means that we have to run candidates against other parties that are saying somewhat similar things, although I think they are different, somewhat similar things, then so be it. If people want to talk to us about how we can make sure that the Libertas voice is effectively heard, we'll talk to them. But we aren't Eurosceptics, and I've been very honest about that. The interesting thing is that, and I've said this, Euroscepticism isn't sort of like a one sort of size fits all thing. I think that if the organs of European governance were democratic and accountable, I think people would have at least.